Echoes of the Veil, Episode 2, Blood Ties in the Mist. Beneath a sky neither night nor morning, Echo crept through the marrow-dark heart of the Veil. The ground was slick with memory, a soft, yielding bed of mud and ancient roots that snagged boots and whispered secrets with every step. Blue mist hung low, swirling in the hollows and clinging to his legs as he moved, sometimes gentle as a mother's hand, sometimes icy with warning. Each crooked tree was bent by burdens never spoken, bark flaked into patterns that resembled warnings or prayers, and the air was thick with scents too old to name: iron, moss, the faint ghosts of smoke. Above, branches arched together, forming tangled vaults that turned daylight into dim blue tunnels and cast shadows like bars. Echo's breaths were shallow, every inhale a note in a song of vigilance. He'd learned to listen to the world's silences, how the birds grew hushed before disaster, how the winds stilled before the ground erupted. Here, the veil pressed close, sometimes a cloak, sometimes a cage. Time moved crookedly. It was impossible to say how many hours or heartbeats had passed since leaving his last shelter. Days seemed to collapse into themselves or stretch until his footsteps lost their meaning. Under a sprawling willow, he paused, hand brushing across its trailing branches. The leaves shuddered at his touch, the surface cool and slick. There were markings here, a child's drawing, a spiral, and a series of short notches, the memory traces of those who'd passed before, their stories caught only at the ragged edges. From far away, something howled, not wolf, not wind, not anything he'd learned to name. Echo tensed, hand closing instinctively around the handle of the knife tied at his thigh. He scanned the path ahead. The mist thickened, taking on the shapes of broken animals, half-dreams and omen. He kept moving. With every step, the mud tried to claim his boots. He passed abandoned camps, ash scattered in the grass, broken spoons, the tattered remains of a scarf. He imagined the desperate hands that had once tied those knots, built those fires, and how quickly hope turned into silence out here. Echo skirted the edge of a cold pool, water reflecting nothing but mist. A trio of twisted statues loomed at the water's edge, faceless, arms open as if asking for something he could not give. He did not linger. Statues here sometimes watched back. An ache began in his legs, sharp and insistent. The world pressed on his shoulders. Every sound, every shape was a threat half glimpsed. The blue mist whispered his name, one that he even already begun to forget. He followed no trail but the sense of danger ahead, and a weaker sense urging him forward, even knowing he moved farther from anything like refuge. Above, a skeletal flock of birds circled without sound, their wings carving slow swathes in the sky. Echo pressed on, jaw set, hunger gnawing at his belly in waves. He heard it before he saw it. A scrape, a guttural breath, something massive shifting behind a tumble of ancient boulders. He crouched, fingers tightening over a stone, a weapon as crude as fear. A shape emerged, hulking, crooked, limbs stretched far beyond reason, skin mottled and pulsing, as though it too was struggling against what the veil demanded. Another emerged, smaller, faster. Amber eyes blinked in the shadow. Echo's heart picked up its pace. His mind mapped the terrain by instinct, angles, escape routes, the weight of every breath. The monsters didn't hesitate. There was no warning in the veil. They came fast and silent. The largest beast barreled forward, a blur of claws and slack jaws. Echo hurled the stone, catching it across the jaw, bone cracked. A liquid shriek filled the clearing. The smaller one dove toward his knees, claws scoring mud and skin. Echo ducked, rolled, slashed with his knife. Too shallow. Blood spattered, black and stinging. He felt pain, sharp and immediate. His arm burned where a claw had caught him, heat dripping down to fingertips. Instinct screamed, but there was no time to think, only move. Echo fought for survival alone in dark mud, dodging, striking, using every ounce of strength and rage. He slammed his knee into a beast's chin. It reeled, mouth slick with drool and anger. He stabbed at another, blade glancing off bone, scoring muscle. There was no rhythm, no heroism, just the ugly ballet of teeth and desperation. When his muscles began to fail and the shadows grew thick with more approaching monsters, a new sound sliced through the chaos. The metallic ring of steel, the rush of swift, certain footsteps. A voice, sharp, urgent. "Left, behind you," a woman shouted. She appeared out of the blue, tall, gaze burning, hair tied back in a dark, practical braid. Her blade flashed, a broad curve of hungry metal. She moved with absolute purpose, slashing not just to kill, but to command the battlefield. Together, for the first time, Echo wasn't alone in a fight. Her orders were crisp. Keep them off me, aim for the joints, stay close. Echo's tired mind seized her rhythm, moving when she moved, ducking when she advanced. They pressed into formation, her blade a whirling promise, his knife stabbing quick and brutal into the gaps she made. Mud churned, sweat and blood slicked their arms. Monsters fell, some twitching, some silent. At last only one beast remained, huge, snarling, enraged. Echo and the woman circled it, bodies battered, breathing in ragged unison. She waited for Echo's nod, an unspoken pact. Then they struck together. Her sword bit deep, his blade followed, puncturing the beast's heart with defiant finality. Silence spilled out in the aftermath, so complete, Echo heard his own pulse. They stood side by side in the bloodied clearing, hands shaking but still ready. "I'm Lyra," she panted, glancing at Echo before tending to her own bleeding palm. "Wrap that arm. We move before the scavengers catch the scent." He obeyed, watching Lyra as she scanned the edges of the battlefield, eyes never at rest. She gathered dropped knives, checked their meager supplies, knelt to splash water over her sword before unsheathing it. They did not speak of trust or intent. They understood. In the Vale, words were precious, but survival was currency. Side by side, they picked a new direction through the trees. Echo limping, Lyra scouting ahead, both scarred, neither sure where the next step would lead.
The trees thinned as Echo and Lyra made their way deeper, each carrying fresh wounds, one bandaged, a few left to sting. Vegetation here was warped, growing in spirals and knots. The ground sometimes jolted underfoot as if remembering ancient earthquakes, and a dampness pressed itself into their boots. Silent hours passed. Birds were rare. Their calls, when heard, sounded like warnings in a language neither could translate. Once, Echo thought he saw figures in the mist. Tall, thin, flickering silhouettes. He kept those fears to himself. As dusk settled, the air grew cold. Lyra motioned for Echo to stop under a ridge overgrown with moss. Here, they prepared camp. Just a thin blanket, some strips of dried meat, and crusty bread. Lyra moved with economical precision, setting traps with twine and bits of glass, checking each knot twice. Echo watched, learning in silence. In the Vale, everything could be an enemy, including someone who knew more than you. It was a truth Lyra seemed to live by. After food, Echo tried to sleep. The ground was hard, every root a memory of pain. Lyra sat nearby, sharpening her blade and watching the shifting dark. She hummed quietly, a melody Echo didn't recognize, but one that bled a little comfort into the night. Around midnight, something scratched at the edges of camp. Lyra's eyes snapped open. Echo felt her tension. In a silent motion, she gripped his wrist, alarm sent through a squeeze, not words. A gaunt, four-legged creature stalked the perimeter, sniffing for blood. Its face was all fangs and bone, fur matted with what might have once been names carved by fear. Echo held his breath. Lyra pointed at the traps, eyes fierce. Suddenly, one trap snapped. The beast yelped, caught. Lyra advanced with her blade, moving like a shadow, nearly invisible, but absolutely deadly. One clean strike, another gasp, and the thing went still, fading back into veil mist as if it had never been. "Never let them linger," Lyra whispered, returning to Echo's side. "They remember faces." For a long time, neither slept. The camp remained quiet but tense. Echo's thoughts wandered, about the bodies buried in mud, the stories carved into bark, Lyra's scars. No one spoke of trust. That would come later, if at all. At dawn, Lyra nudged Echo awake. "Light's friendlier, but not by much. We move." They marched. Trees gave way to winding gullies, streams with water sharp as metal. Echo found a patch of blue flowers growing from stone. Lyra tore a handful and showed him how to grind them into paste for wounds and hunger. Along the way, they saw remnants of lost travelers. A boot, a broken mirror, even a scratched note left under a rock. "Remember the way out." Lyra shook her head. "They never do." Toward midday, the world grew more twisted. The ground bent up as if trying to reclaim itself. Mist thickened, swallowing sound. Lyra led, Echo followed, sometimes matching her step, sometimes lagging behind, lost in shifting half-memories. By a split in the path, Lyra stopped. Left leads to higher ground, fewer beasts but harder to hide. Right, deeper into mist, more food but more dangers. Pick. Echo hesitated. He studied the paths, remembered wounds and hunger. "We go right. Food gives hope, even if it bites." A rare smile flickered on Lyra's lips. They turned together, stepping into thicker fog, senses sharpened, following the soundless pulse of a world that shifted with every secret kept. Wading deeper into the fog, the world pressed in, each sound amplified. Pebble skitters, harsh breaths, boots squelching in cold, hidden pools. Every so often, Echo glanced back, uncertain if he'd see his own footprints or memories erasing themselves. Lyra kept pace just ahead, her steps always choosing uncertain ground, but never faltering. Occasionally, she reached back without a word, pointing out a patch of poison moss or a nearly invisible tripwire of roots left by someone desperate, long gone. They found shelter beneath a stone arch, half crumbled, swallowed by vines. Here, Lyra paused, kneeling near markings etched into the rock. She brushed away dirt, revealing symbols, crossed lines, concentric circles, a broken arrow. Messages from survivors or warnings only the veil could decipher. Echo squatted beside her. "You understand any of it?" She exhaled, measuring the shapes. "Bits? Some are from scavenger bands, some not human. Maybe never were. This," she traced a spiral with her finger, "means danger rests here. Or nests, maybe. The veil likes its riddles." As rain began, falling sharp and cold, they gathered close under the arch. Hours slipped by with only the patter on leaves and the distant, echoing howl of something out there in the blank. To kill the silence, Echo offered a half-remembered story, something about a sunlit city with towers so tall they touched warmth above the clouds. Lyra didn't interrupt, her face thoughtful, almost sad. When he finished, she tossed a stone toward the rain, watching ripples. "I had a brother once," she said quietly, words a little broken.
He would have liked stories like that. Maybe he would have survived if I'd told more stories. The confession lingered, heavier than the damp. Echo didn't press. He had learned, even in so little time, that some wounds grew sharper when named. He simply listened, and for a while, it was enough. When the rain stopped, they moved on. Hunger grew. They foraged, Lyra showing what roots to pull, which thorns hid bitter berries. Every meal was scavenged, split equally in silence. Once, among rotting logs, Echo spotted a faded scrap of cloth with a name stitched into it. Mira. He showed it to Lyra. She only shook her head. Leave it. The veil takes what it wants. No point letting it remember us. As night crept in, they found the ruined bones of what had once been a cabin. The wood groaned, but the roof held. They lit a faint fire, letting its warmth claw back a trace of safety. Lyra mended her coat by firelight, teaching Echo how to patch holes with thread torn from the lining. Echo watched rain steam from her hair, listened to the quiet strength in her voice, wondered what it would mean to trust someone fully in this place. Sleep came slowly. He woke once, heart racing. Sure, he had heard footsteps just outside. Only the mist waited. Echo drifted again, clutching a memory of warmth, uncertain whether it belonged to him or if it was only another illusion the veil offered survivors on the edge.
At dawn, the forest was a cathedral of shadows and scattered white light. Echo and Lyra were already awake, silent as the fog itself, every movement practiced, every sound weighed. There was no comfort in routine, only necessity. They trekked beside a winding river, the water black and quietly hostile. At its edge, animal tracks crisscrossed, some deep and fresh, others confused and circling back as if the creature had doubted even itself. Midway, Echo found a tooth in the mud, long, yellowed, heavier than it looked. He tucked it into his pouch, unsure why. Lyra only watched, saying nothing, but her gaze was sharp. Sometimes the smallest trophies could be the veil's way of tracking a soul. A few hours later, wings beat above them, a flock of crows passing overhead, silent but for the air they parted. Echo remembered a saying from a life before. Crows carry warnings, not omens. Here, it felt reversed. They navigated the tangled shore, working their way to a section of river where the current formed a barrier of frothing silver. Lyra squatted, pointing to a makeshift cable strung across two trees, someone's desperate attempt at a bridge. "We cross here," she said. "One at a time. If it snaps, let yourself drift to that sandbar. Don't panic." Echo nodded and let her go first. She watched her grip the thick, wet rope with both hands, moving sideways, each step slow and measured. Halfway across, the bridge groaned, but did not fail. On her side, she waved him forward. Echo followed, feeling every drop of water lapping his calves, every shift of the rope, every echo of his father's voice, lost now, or maybe invented, telling him to hold steady when everything threatened to give way. He made it. As he set foot on the far bank, something in the undergrowth snarled, wet and hungry. Lyra didn't hesitate. She drew her blade, stance wide, eyes narrowing at the shifting fern. Echo readied his knife. The bushes shuddered. From within burst a dog-like creature, hide half peeled, mouth filled with too many teeth. Its eyes, oddly human, locked on Echo, pleading, furious, wild. It lunged. Echo slashed and missed, air whistling where the beast had just been. Lyra blocked a second charge, blade flashing, connecting with muscle. The creature yelped but pressed the attack, jaws snapping near Echo's thigh. They fought as a single unit, Echo distracting with quick feints, Lyra aiming to disable and end it. The river's roar made the world feel narrow, sharp, urgent. Finally, Lyra landed a deep cut. The creature scrambled away, vanishing into a hollow log, wounded but alive. And so were they. "Next time, don't hesitate," Lyra said, voice cool but not unkind. Echo nodded, catching his breath. Together they pressed on, hands still trembling but alive. Not far ahead, the trees opened to reveal ruins, stone pillars half sunken in marsh, carvings covered in moss. Lyra knelt at one, reading old symbols, while Echo scouted the perimeter. Here, something was off, the air thicker, the silence deliberate. Echo turned, meeting Lyra's eyes. "We're not alone," he whispered. She nodded, and for the first time, Echo wondered not if, but when night returned, they'd be the only ones still claiming these haunted paths.
The ruin seemed to pull them in, silence weighty enough to slow even Lyra's stride. Pillars, worn and leaning, jutted from the marsh in a crooked circle. Echo felt ancient eyes pressing from within the stone, impossible to see, yet impossible to ignore. Lyra traced a finger over carvings slimed by time, faded faces, broken animals, spirals splitting outward like echoes of lost prayers. She squatted, listening to the ground as if it would whisper the truth. Echo explored the perimeter. Every footstep splashed through shallow water, disturbing lilies black as bruises. The air buzzed. Not wind, but something trapped, yearning to break free. He found a half-buried bundle under a slab, bits of thin cloth, charred bones, shards of colored glass. He didn't touch the bones. The veil had taught him respect. Lyra rose, drawing silent attention. This place was meant for rituals, or warnings. Some ruins hold memories, not all of them harmless. Before Echo could answer, the ground trembled. Ripples spread through standing water. Pillars rattled, a pulse pushing up from deep beneath their feet. From the far edge of the circle, dense fog thickened. Shapes emerged. Not quite monsters, not quite human. Gray-skinned, eyes pale and wide, their fingers elongated, faces fixed in expressions of mourning. Their movements were slow, deliberate, as if weighed by grief or ritual rules. Echo felt the world tighten. Lyra held a blade low, but her stance was defensive, not eager. The figures did not attack. Instead, they began circling the pair, chanting in voices that sounded more like wind through stones than language. Each word vibrated in Echo's bones, a song he half recognized from some deeper memory. One figure broke off, approaching with arms spread, palms stained dark. It stopped before Lyra, long fingers pressing a fragment of glass into her hand, then stepped back, resuming the dance. Lyra whispered, "Don't offend them. This could be a test." Echo nodded, trying to steady his heartbeat. He mirrored Lyra's tension, waiting, watching, and wondering what these beings wanted in a place bathed with old blood. At the climax of their ritual, the ground shuddered again, a tremor that made every pillar tilt. The mourners locked eyes with Echo, voices joining in a single low note. The mist flattened. In that moment, a vision flashed him to somewhere else, standing in the center of another ruin, surrounded by shadow, watching Lyra fall beneath a tide of ghostly hands. But when he blinked, he was back, body tense and skin cold. The chanting stopped. The mourners retreated, vanishing into fog as quickly as they appeared. Lyra released a breath, staring at the fragment in her hand. "We're marked now. For what? I don't know." Echo looked down, noticing a spiral chillingly similar to those on the stones now scored into his palm. "The veil wants something more from us," he muttered. They pressed onward, each scanning the ruins, feeling new eyes tracking every move. As above, blackbirds circled, calling in a language Echo feared he might soon understand. Midway through the ruined circle,
Echo and Lyra pressed onward, bodies marked by the ritual, minds haunted by old visions. The mist thickened, sinking heavy over their shoulders, obscuring even their own feet. Only the sound of breath and the distant moan of water kept time moving. The ground beneath them pulsed, as if the veil itself was waking, hungry for something promised in ancient days. Lyra paused, iron glinting on her blade. Something's changed. The silence. Listen. Echo strained, catching the edge of a distant sound, a low growl, rhythmic and slow, almost deliberate. A pack of shadows split from the ruins, their forms more solid than mist, yet less than flesh. Everything about them was wrong, teeth too many, eyes set in uneven rows, talons glinting as if dipped in black oil. One monster at the front wore a spiral carved into its chest, a sickening echo of Echo's new mark. The two braced, backs together, weapons drawn. Lyra's fingers trembled only for a breath before going rigid with purpose. The shadows circled faster, hissing, their voices blending into one, a language without words, just raw need, just hunger. Echo tried to remember his father's lessons, always hold the line, never run from your own shadow. But his courage felt thin under the weight of the veil's gaze. The attack leapt, sudden and coordinated, a wave of bodies breaking against Echo and Lyra, claws slashing at arms and legs, teeth gnashing air and flesh. Echo felt a sharp pain slice down his thigh, blood warmed his boot. He screamed, slashing wildly, driving his blade into mist and snarl. Lyra was a whirlwind beside him, every movement a dance. She ducked low, blade arcing upward, tearing a monster's stomach open. Black ichor splattered the stones, a shriek tore through the fog. Still more pressed in. One monster gripped Echo's wrist, crushing it until the knife dropped. He grunted, buckling, seeing mist begin to coil over his skin. "Echo!" Lyra called, tossing him a dagger. He caught it left-handed, plunging it into the shadow's neck. The grip loosened, but the pain rang through his bones. The ground quaked, one of the ancient pillars toppled, chunks of stone raining, forcing them to duck. Echo and Lyra scrambled behind the fallen pillar, breathing in stone dust, and old magic. The pack regrouped, circling again, now maddened by spilled blood and the taste of battle. Echo saw one lock eyes with him. The mark on its chest glowed faint, as if in recognition. "We're not meant to win here," Echo gasped. Lyra's eyes hardened. Winning's not always surviving. The largest shadow pounced, its mouth expanding beyond anything natural. Lyra stepped between Echo and the beast, taking the hit. Claws raked her shoulder, blood flowing, but she stood firm, blade flashing bright, digging deep into the monster's maw. Echo lunged forward, slashing at tendrils of mist that threatened his partner, cutting away coiling arms. Every cut sent memories through his skin, childhood pain, loneliness, the meaning of his new name. As the fight raged, the mist itself began to pulse, folding in on itself, colors bleeding between silver and deep blue. Echo felt the world shift, the veil whispering in words only half heard. Sacrifice, choice, memory. He looked to Lyra, her lips moving, a mantra or prayer, eyes glazed as if seeing something beyond. A sudden realization struck. The monsters were not fighting them alone. They fought for meaning, for something ancient within the circle, a power Echo felt curling underneath their feet, both promise and warning. The largest shadow pressed Echo against the stone, claws digging, fangs inches from his face. He reached for anything, a rock, a thought, a memory. Lyra screamed his name, voice raw, hope flaring, then fading. In that last breath, pain blooming, edges blurring, Echo saw all the paths he'd walked, every loss, every sound of breath in the mist. He pressed the spiral mark on his palm against the monster's chest. The world flickered. A blinding blue light erupted from the stone circle, throwing every shadow, monster, memory, hope into chaos. Lyra lunged through the brilliant haze, half falling, half flying, catching Echo's shoulder. For a moment, everything stilled. Echo saw, through the fog, a new figure, tall, hooded, features indistinct, watching from beyond the ruined pillars. A promise or a threat? He couldn't tell. The creatures recoiled, howling, mask-faced and desperate. The ground split beneath Echo, vision narrowing to blue and white. Lyra's grip tightened. "Echo! Don't let go!" He stared at the new figure, feeling a cold smile, an invitation into darkness and understanding. The mist rose, waves of memory and fate swirling. The world collapsed inward, and the episode ended. Echo, bloodied, marked, caught between Lyra and the unknown, suspended in a moment of terror and revelation, with destiny waiting just beyond the next breath.